Hey guys, welcome back to more homeowner association stories. In this video, an HOA Karen pretended to own my home for free parking. The only problem is I am not even part of this HOA. Let's dive right into the video. The first one is titled, Am I the a-hole for taking down our power-tripping HOA board? So 3 years ago my wife and I bought our dream home in what seemed like a perfect suburban neighborhood. The houses were well maintained, the streets were clean, and everyone appeared friendly. We knew there was an HOA, but the rules seemed reasonable on paper. Oh, how wrong we were. The first red flag appeared about 6 months after we moved in. So my wife, who loves gardening, decided to start a small vegetable garden in our backyard. Nothing crazy, just some tomatoes, cucumbers and herbs. Well, one day while I was at work, she called me in tears. "Honey, there's a letter from the HOA," she said, her voice shaking. "They are threatening to fine us $500 because someone reported our vegetable garden. They say it's against the rules." I was confused. There was nothing in the HOA guidelines explicitly prohibiting vegetable gardens. When I called the HOA president, a woman who I will just call Mrs. President, she explained that they had used drones to inspect all the properties and found several violations. Excuse me? I interrupted. You're using drones to spy on people's backyards? And by the way, Ripe stars, one interesting thing here. I've heard that a couple of times now in HOA posts on Reddit that HOAs use drones to essentially spy on people. Absolutely insane. Anyway, the HOA person said, "We prefer to call it Community Standard Enforcement Surveillance. The board voted on this measure last month. It was in the newsletter." I checked, it was buried on page 12 of a 15-page newsletter written in a tiny font. That's when I started documenting everything. The drone incidents were just the beginning. The board began implementing increasingly ridiculous rules. One morning, I woke up to find a $200 fine on my door because my car was parked on the street in front of my house overnight. When I attended the next board meeting to contest it, Mrs. President smugly informed me that street parking was now prohibited for aesthetic purposes. But what about when we have guests? Another homeowner asked. "They can park in your driveway or garage," Mrs. President responded. "If that's insufficient, perhaps this is not the right neighborhood for you." The garbage can rule was the next absurdity, so they mandated that bins had to be brought in within 15 minutes of pickup. The problem? Well, the pickup schedule varied each week and they wouldn't provide a set schedule. People were literally sitting by their windows watching for the garbage truck and then race out to bring in their bins. My next door neighbor, a retired teacher in his 70s, got fined 3 times because he couldn't move fast enough to get his bins in within their arbitrary time frame. When he tried to appeal, they doubled his fine. But the breaking point came when my neighbors across the street, a young couple with 2 kids, got sued by the HOA. Their crime? Replacing their 30-year-old drafty windows with energy-efficient ones. The board claimed the new window frames were the wrong shade of eggshell cream. Not white, not beige, the wrong shade of eggshell cream. The couple spent thousands defending themselves in court only to lose because of some obscure clause about maintaining architectural harmony. They were forced to replace all their windows again, pushing them into significant debt. And that is when I'd had enough. I'm an accountant by profession and I started digging into the HOA's financial records, which they were legally required to make available to homeowners. It took some persistence. They lost my first 3 requests for documentation, but what I found was interesting. Essentially, the board had been mismanaging funds using our dues for so-called consulting fees paid to companies owned by board members' relatives. They had also been selectively enforcing rules, waiving fines for friends, while aggressively pursuing others. I reached out to other frustrated neighbors and we formed a coalition. We hired a lawyer who specialized in HOA law and she was appalled by what she found. The drone surveillance alone is a privacy violation, but combined with the financial mismanagement and selective enforcement, we got a solid case here. The lawsuit we filed was comprehensive. We included everything: the illegal surveillance, the financial misconduct, the arbitrary rule changes without proper notice, the selective enforcement, 28 households joined as plaintiffs. The board's reaction was predictable. They tried to intimidate us. They sent threatening letters, increased patrols of our properties, and even tried to pass an emergency measure prohibiting homeowners from joining class action lawsuits against the HOA. The court battle lasted 8 months. The turning point came when we submitted footage of board members using the HOA drone to spy on a sunbathing teenager. A clear invasion of privacy and potentially criminal act. The judge was livid and in the end, we won. The entire board was forced to resign and the court appointed a receiver to manage the HOA until new elections could be held. The drone program was permanently banned and all fines issued in the past year were invalidated. The investigation into the financial misconduct is ongoing and there's talk of criminal charges for some board members. We held new elections last month. The new board is made up of reasonable people who understand that an HOA should serve the community, not terrorize it. By the way, if you're curious, the young couple with the windows, the new board's first act was to approve their original window installation and reimburse their legal fees from the HOA's insurance policy. My wife's vegetable garden is thriving now, and she has even started a community gardening club. The retired teacher next door does not have to worry about racing to bring in his garbage bins anymore. All in all, the atmosphere in the neighborhood has completely changed. People are outside again talking to their neighbors, kids are playing in the streets, but here is why I am actually posting. So last week, Mrs. President's daughter showed up at my door. She was crying, saying I had ruined her mother's life. Apparently, the investigation into the financial misconduct revealed that Mrs. President had been embezzling money to pay for her gambling addiction. She is facing criminal charges now, and her daughter blamed me for destroying their family. What really got to me was when she said, "Mom was just trying to keep the neighborhood nice. The rules were not that bad. You could have just moved if you didn't like them." I stood my ground and replied, "Your mother chose to abuse her power and break the law. Those were her choices, not mine. I just exposed the truth." She stormed off, but now some neighbors, mostly friends of the old board, are saying that I went too nuclear. They are claiming that I should have tried to work things out privately instead of destroying people's lives. One former board member's wife cornered my wife at the grocery store and said that her husband lost his job after his employer found out about the HOA scandal. I know we did the right thing legally, but seeing the personal fallout has been tough. These people did wrong, but they are still our neighbors. Their kids go to school with our kids and we see them at the local shops. The atmosphere is a bit weird now, like the neighborhood is divided into winners and losers from the lawsuit. So am I the a-hole for taking down the HOA board and exposing their crimes, knowing it would have such personal consequences for their families? And yeah guys, let me know in the comments what you think about this. Do you think OP was acting like an a-hole here? Or not? I would say he was definitely not the a-hole. I would say if you do HOA crimes, then you should either do the time or get some kind of consequences for your behavior. Honestly, you cannot act like a mini dictator and then if there are consequences for your behavior, just act like nothing happened. Either way, comment number 1 on Reddit said, "Not the a-hole, you're a hero. The fact that they were using drones to spy on people's backyards is dystopian level crazy. You probably saved your neighborhood from turning into a full-blown authoritarian regime." Comment number 2, "You're the a-hole. This is why nobody likes whistleblowers." Sure, the board made some mistakes, but you didn't have to destroy their lives over it. Mrs. President has a gambling addiction. That's a mental health issue. She needed help and not public humiliation. You could have handled this privately instead of dragging everyone's dirty laundry into the open. Now their families are suffering, kids are probably getting bullied at school, and the neighborhood is divided. Hope you are happy with yourself, Captain Justice. Comment number 3, not the a-hole. As a senior citizen, the garbage can rule makes my blood boil. Forcing elderly residents to rush out within 15 minutes could have caused injuries. You probably prevented some accidents with your actions. Comment number 4, everyone sucks here. The old board was clearly corrupt and needed to go, but OP, you went about this like a wrecking ball. Instead of building a coalition and trying to change things from within, you went straight for nuclear options. Yes, they were breaking the laws, but you seem to take a bit too much satisfaction in watching these people's lives implode. The drone stuff was creepy and the financial fraud was wrong, but you could have given them a chance to step down quietly before bringing in lawyers and the media. Sometimes being right does not mean that you handled it right. And yeah guys, if you have watched until here, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. The next one is titled, HOA Karen pretends to own my home for free parking. So my wife and I looked around for a while at different places and we were not in a huge rush to move, so we were taking our sweet time and making sure to find something that was a good decision. 2 years beforehand, we found a nice house that my wife loved, but I did research and found that it had a very strict HOA, so we decided not to move there. 2 years later, we looked around again and we found another house that was in the same neighborhood, but now there was no HOA. I was shocked because I've never seen an HOA just vanish in real life before. We loved the house and decided that the HOA leaving must have been some kind of sign for us to go ahead and buy it. I did ask my new neighbors, who were friendly and welcomed us, what happened to the HOA I heard that they used to have. It turned out that they were very unpopular, and when they disbanded, it was officially said that it was due to mismanagement. But not everybody believed that. There were a lot of rumors of what happened to it. They were gone, but kind of not forgotten due to signs and other things plastered around the neighborhood. They had a box by a park where they would post notices, and since it was locked, you could see the last letter, they put in saying it would be the last meeting ever. There were even signs in many places, including in front of our driveway, that said resident parking only. The city is not really in a rush to get them down compared to other things. One neighbor that I haven't mentioned yet is the only one that I don't like. That is because she is the definition of a Karen. She does not seem to care about anyone around her and is totally absorbed in herself. She talks on her phone loudly in public, argues with people for no reason, and tells kids not to ride their bikes on the street near her house. There's one thing worse than Karen, believe it or not, and that would be her family. She has extended family that always seems to be over for every little occasion. At first I didn't like it just because each member seems to be louder and more entitled than the next one. They make tons of noise outside into the early hours of the morning when people are trying to sleep. Then they seem to just leave trash and cigarette butts on anybody's lawn they want. None of that is my biggest problem with her and her stupid family though. My issue is that they seem to believe they can park anywhere they want. It took a couple times before they decided my large driveway would be the perfect place to park. Both in front of it and flat out in it, since they could fit about 4 cars. 5 if they also use one to block it. I tried to be polite about it first and told them that it was my driveway and they couldn't park there. I guess that was my mistake in trying to be nice to a bunch of Karens, because I immediately faced a barrage of verbal attacks because of that one comment I made. They told me that they were allowed to park there and that I didn't know anything. Another one told me that I should be grateful they parked there and was probably a horrible neighbor. Finally, Karen herself emerged to see what the problem was, as multiple family members pointed me out as the center of commotion. Me, all I did was let them know that they couldn't park in my driveway. Karen, I know you're new here, but you should be able to read the signs. She points to a resident parking only HOA sign. Karen, this means that your house was part of the HOA and it means anybody can park there. Me, the HOA does not exist anymore. So even if that was true at one point, it isn't now. They can move the cars to the street, there's plenty of room. Suggesting street parking seemed to be some magic word that started all of them going totally crazy. If I thought they were nuts before, it was nothing compared to the screeching they were doing now. Apparently, I insulted them all because of course their cars were too good to park on the street where they could potentially get damaged. I was not lying about there being plenty of parking, by the way, available on the street that would fit all of them and not even cause the need to walk to Karen's house very far. I decided that I was gonna stop this before it became a problem and said something that I knew would make them hate me but probably settle the matter. So the cars were already inside and blocking my driveway at this point, and I wanted them to move, and I wanted it now. They were not budging, and Karen only had one last thing to say to me on the matter. Your house is part of the HOA. That means you need to share the parking. In fact, I even have the paperwork from the HOA showing that your address is listed on the directory. That is all the proof I need. Those cars are not going anywhere until we are good and ready to move them, so I suggest you get comfortable. Me, once again, there is no HOA. Your guests need to move the cars. Karen and her family of other Karens refused and went inside her house to celebrate. I was not gonna spend my morning trying to get a bunch of hungover people up to force them to move the cars so I could get out. So I waited about 2 hours until I knew everybody would be good and drunk at the party. Then I called the towing company to tell them I had 5 cars blocking me and I needed them removed. They sent somebody who confirmed with me that none of them were my cars and they were indeed on my own private property. He started to load up the cars and take them away. His truck could only hold 3 at a time since it was a flatbed, and he brought another tow truck and driver with him since they knew it would be 5. Just as the last was being loaded up, Karen and her family ran out of the house screaming at us to stop it. They were claiming a few things to the drivers. The first thing being that I never asked them to move the cars, and if they took them off the trucks, they would move them. It was clear to anybody that they were drunk and in no condition to get behind the wheel, even if it was just to move the car. They were told that, plus that the cars were on the truck and they were not coming off of it until transported to the tow yard. Karen was claiming that it was legal for them to park there because of the HOA rules and tried to use the sign as a reasoning. He told her that it was still my private property and the only thing she could do was try and take me to court for it. She turned her attention onto me now, knowing that she was not going to get anywhere with the drivers. She started screaming and causing a huge scene. Drunk and screaming at the top of her lungs that I was a liar and gave them permission to park there and that I did this on purpose to ruin her party. That I and everybody else were just jealous because she threw great parties and never invited any of us, so we just wanted to ruin her time. Family members were joining in at screaming at me and calling me every single name that they could think of. Karen was screaming that she was the true owner of my home and property due to her special status affiliation with the homeowner association. She insisted that meant she would be entitled to free parking on my property. They were causing such a scene and got the bright idea to try and block the tow trucks with their bodies so the car couldn't be taken away. I cannot say for sure who called the police, but I do know they arrived right in the middle of all of the commotion and Karen actually seemed relieved to see them. Karen, "Oh my god, officer, please, you need to stop this crazy man. He called to get my family's cars all towed away." Officer, okay, hold on. You called the tow truck, sir? Me, yes I did. They were parked in my driveway and despite asking, they refused to move the cars. I need to get my cars out in the morning and considering how much they seem to be drinking, it was not gonna happen. So I'm getting them towed. Karen, liar, just look at the sign. The HOA says that this parking is for residents and he needs to share it. Me, and I have papers showing that the HOA shut down 2 years ago, if you would like to see it, officer. He looked at both and agreed that the HOA did not exist anymore and she couldn't use that as an excuse to do anything she wanted. Officer, and just so you know, even if the sign was accurate, it probably is referring to the street. Driveways are private property of the homeowner. Plus, these are not residents, they are guests. You can either help me tell your family to move and let the trucks do their job, or I'll be forced to arrest all of them. Karen seemed to want to continue her argument, but instead gets her family to back off. They were all issued a warning about not trespassing and are given information by the tow truck driver about where they can pick up their cars tomorrow when they are sober. The entire ordeal seemed to kill the mood of her party, which was funny because now her guests could not even leave. I was beyond pleased with myself and didn't care if Karen thought horrible things about me and would yell at me more the next day, which, spoiler alert, she did. From what I heard, it took a long time and a great deal of money in order for them to get all the cars back in their possession. My relationship with Karen ever since has been strained, with her making nasty remarks and telling everybody how jealous I am of her and lied to the police to get her in trouble. Nobody has blocked my driveway since though, as long as they seem to learn their lesson about messing with my driveway, I was happy. Now I'm starting to wonder if those resident parking things were meant to be for driveways and had something to do with the HOA getting shut down in the first place. Either way, the next one is a story from r/AITA and it is titled, "Am I the douche for selling my family home because my pregnant sister-in-law ate my dinner?" I also want to point out me and my brother have two different fathers. Anyway, I, 19 female, lost my father last year to cancer. He left me 90% of his stuff, including his family home, that was left to him by his dad. It's been in their family for over 100 years. My brother, 34, and my dad did not have a relationship, but he did leave him 10k. My mom was pissed at the will reading, but since she got 10k, she couldn't do anything about it. For the past year, me and her live okay together. She went on acting like it was her house like before, which I had no problem with, until in May my brother and his girlfriend, 30, moved in without even asking me. They are messy, entitled and rude, and I told them in July I want them out by September because they don't pay for anything nor wash a dish, and in August they announced they were pregnant. My sister-in-law smugly said, "Guess we won't be moving out now." It didn't go down well. When I told them that I wanted them out, my mom and brother basically laughed in my face. And well, the past few months have been hell. They've become worse than before and my mom enables it and then demands me to treat my sister-in-law like a princess because she is pregnant and I once had to wait outside McDonald's until they opened to get her a McMuffin. And well, here I maybe was the a-hole because my sister-in-law is pregnant, she eats everything she sees, like the cupcakes my friend made for my birthday. She ate all 6, didn't even get to try them. I cannot even make my lunch the night before because when I go to get it, it will be gone. She will have a smug look on her face while rubbing her belly, then laugh and say,
I could not help myself. Blame the baby. If I put stuff in my room, my mom will open the door with the spare key, sister-in-law can go through my mini fridge. Well, anyway, a week ago I was running late to college, I didn't have time for my breakfast or to make lunch and I had to go to work straight after. So all I had that day was a bar of chocolate, and when I got home I was starving. I made myself dinner while it was cooling down. I went to use the bathroom. I must have been in there 10 minutes at most. By the time I came out, she had 70% of my dinner eaten, and I literally lost my crap, of course, and she started crying. My mom and brother started screaming at me for making her cry, making excuses like how she couldn't help it and it was my fault for leaving food around her. Well, I had enough. I told them get out, just like before. I got mocked, but here's the thing. Back in October, my uncle offered me a life-changing amount of money for the house. I called him up, crying a few days ago, explaining the situation, and he said he would buy the house, but he will evict my mom and brother. They of course did not take it too well, and I've had to stay with a friend. I've been receiving texts and I'm being tagged in multiple posts on social media. I'm starting to think that I'm the bad person now. So, am I the jerk for making my mom and brother homeless? Comment number 1, not the a-hole. They stomped all over you, man. They didn't treat you like family, so why should you treat them that way now? You're fine, mate. Your uncle is the one evicting them, not you. Comment number 2 also said, not the a-hole. I would sell the house, let them get evicted and have a smug look in my face when they are out on the street. Family means nothing if they treat you like trash. Comment number 3, not the a-hole. To be honest, you should have gotten legal papers drawn to evict them and involve the cops, because it seriously seems like they were emotionally abusing you. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I would also say that OP was definitely not the a-hole in this story. However, I'm so curious about what you have to say in regards to this story. Let me know in the comments what you think. And now we will read an update to the story. So I'm on a break, I will address some stuff. Some of your roasts are hilarious, I honestly deserve it for how bad my grammar is. So if I sell the house to my uncle, I will lose 100k, but he's always been good to me and it's one of those situations where I would sleep better knowing it's gone to someone in my dad's family. My mom told me because of my age I wouldn't be taken seriously if I tried to evict them. If I evict them and continue to live in the house along with the high financial costs, I don't think they would ever let me live in peace. The thing is, my mom has health issues and my sister-in-law will have to move in with her parents and they won't allow my brother, so I would be splitting up a young family in my mom's words. And here, Ripe Stars, unfortunately there are no further updates to this story, at least none I could find, and it really is a difficult situation for OP, but in the end he owns the house so he can do whatever he wants with it. And also, as people pointed out correctly, his family really treated him like trash.
Before we end the video, we will read a funny story from r/PattyRevenge. It is titled, Send a Sexy Message from My Boss to a Customer. So I used to work at a restaurant that functioned as a bar in the evenings. The brunch was always super busy, but the evenings were always dead, and that was my bartending shift. For context, my nickname was 26.50 on account of the fact that one evening I sold $26.50 worth of booze over 6 hours. People rarely came in. Because of this, I was often tasked with doing prep for the brunch rush the next morning, aka cracking eggs, peeling potatoes, and of course roll-ups. For the uninitiated, when you go to a restaurant and they give you your cutlery rolled up in a napkin, that's a roll-up. And someone does hundreds of those by hand. And well, my boss was generally a jerk who seemingly enjoyed tasking me with crappy jobs like cleaning toilets and such, and had been a particular prick that evening before he left. The restaurant was small, and I knew that he would be slinging brunch the next morning, so in one of the roll-ups I wrote something along the lines of, "I think you're hot. Would you go out with me? Check 1, yes, no." Then included his phone number. Then I put it in the pile to go out the next morning during the rush and went home. The next morning I got a text reading, "You're such a damn mother trucker. That was awesome, but still, you're a mother trucker." Apparently a couple had walked in and he had given the roll-up in question to the guy, who was super weirded out and confused, asking if it was for him or his girlfriend. My boss had no concept of what was happening, so he was equally weirded out by this guy, handing him this napkin with his own phone number on it. It was apparently amazing. And yeah guys, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my podcast playlist and I will see you again tomorrow.